friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum, and in today's video we're going to do my June wrap-up. So we're going to talk about all the books I managed to read in the month of June, and there are 9 of them to talk about today. I did get started into Valor but didn't get very far in, so that one is going to be held off until the July wrap-up. But I did manage to catch up on some read-alongs and finish out a series, plus try Cozy Fantasy this month. So we definitely still have some stuff to talk about today. So buckle in and let's get down to it. And the first book I have to talk about today is Carl's Doomsday Scenario, book 2 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. And also we're going to talk about the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, book 3 in the same series, because I read them both. And I gave both of these a 4-star rating. So I definitely had a good time with both of them, and I enjoyed continuing on with the series, but neither had the same kind of appeal or magic to me that book 1 did. So I think I kind of narrowed it down. Book 1, it was more like you're introduced to the premise of Carl and Princess Donut, which is his ex-girlfriend's cat, being sucked into the dungeon and figuring out that they have to basically go along with this in order to survive. And you got to see a lot of their character dynamics, but more than that, you got to see them have clever solutions to minor plot things that happen. And you also got to see quite a bit of their character progression for the dungeon characters they ended up deciding to be. In books 2 and 3, the novels really focused on different elements within the story, and I think those elements just didn't work quite as well for me. In book 2, we really focused on a storyline within that specific level of the dungeon, and for me, the way that that one was laid out, it didn't really leave a lot of room for me to have interesting guesses or theories based on things that were going to come in that story. And so I just didn't have quite the same level of investment in that one. I think with character progression, when they learn a new skill, I'm always thinking, oh, well, they could use that for this, or they could use it this way, and that would be so creative. So I get to have theories, but in a situation like this where it's really just more focused on a story that's unfolding and the way that it was told, it didn't really allow you to have a lot of room for those. It was also interesting to talk to some of my friends after finishing this entry in the series, and kind of the popular opinion is that book 2 is the weakest in the series. So if the weakest book in the series is still a 4-star read for me, that's pretty good. Book 3 I did like more than book 2, but I had a similar kind of thing with it where it really just chose to focus on the level of the dungeon that they were in at this point in the story. And we got a lot of sort of description of how this was all laid out, and it was really a lot of them trying to find the door. Despite that, it was really fun to see them continue the adventure, and I did definitely enjoy some of the character dynamics present in this one. And yeah, I'm definitely consistently having a good time with the series and looking forward to continuing on. So next I managed to pick up Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, which helped me finish a dang series, yay! And this is, of course, the last book in the Daevabad trilogy. And essentially, if you don't know about this, this is a Middle Eastern desert fantasy series following both Nari and Alizaid. And Nari is a con woman in Cairo who accidentally summons a djinn who is escorting her to Daevabad. And then Alizaid is a prince within Daevabad, so you get to see a lot of the more political aspects of the city from his point of view. And sadly, this third installment in the trilogy just did not work as well for me as the first 2, and I was pretty disappointed with how everything went. So I think there was kind of a shift in the writing style, or I guess what the writing chose to focus on more in this one. We really honed into moments with the characters in this third book. And as somebody who's not a character reader and is more of a plot reader, that was pretty frustrating for me because I really just wanted all of the plot answers, and I didn't necessarily gravitate as much to moments with the characters. I mean, they were satisfying still, some more than others, but really I was invested in the series for the plot and the political aspects of it, and with the way the third book went, it just didn't work as well in those areas. There was a lot of kind of telling instead of showing, and what I mean by that in this case is that there were a lot of concepts or things kind of brought into the story that we didn't really get to explore how they affected things. We were just sort of told about them and oh, this is how it went. But yeah, it didn't really work out for my taste as a reader as well as the other 2 books in the series did. Then further to that, this does something that kind of can be very irritating at times, and in this case I found it irritating, and that is when you have a point of view character who's purposely not telling you something so that it can be a reveal for them later on. And in this case, it was extra frustrating because it basically negated the need for a previous chapter to even happen. Like, you basically read a chapter and you think one thing is happening, and then you're told later, like, oh, and after this, I changed my mind. It was frustrating here in particular because it could have lent more tension to the climax of the story had we just not had that, and had we like been in on things from the get-go, because I would have had more questions about how the final confrontation would have gone down had this aspect been different. So yeah, like that just completely didn't work for me at all. And then further to that, the final confrontation is also interrupted by a character flashback to give us information on one of the character backstories. And I was pretty frustrated about that because not only did it kill like the pacing and the momentum and tension of the final climax and the ending of the story, but it also was something that could have been placed like any other time in the trilogy, and I would have enjoyed it just as much then. I mean, arguably, like, it makes more sense to be in book 3, but it didn't necessarily need to be in the ending of book 3, you know? Like, it just, the way that she decided to write the ending in this frustrated me more than it needed to. There were also kind of aspects to the series that weren't realized as well in this particular book as they were in earlier books in the series. And one of those things is the morally gray and villainous characters. I feel like in this installment, we just didn't get enough nuance with them. We didn't really understand their motivations as well. And in earlier books of the series, this wasn't as much of an issue. So it was kind of frustrating that way. I did find some of the moments with the characters and some of the answers satisfying, but ultimately this just had so much more potential and it let me down and disappointed me a little bit. So yeah, 3.25 star rating. And sadly, it's not a series I plan to reread. So after that, I did decide that I wanted to pick up The River in Silver, which is the short story collection that takes place in this world. And my reasoning for doing so was that I was hoping for more villain motivations or more nuance for them. I was also hoping for maybe some world building information that expanded on what we knew from the trilogy, because the trilogy kind of sets up a lot but doesn't explain a lot. And I was also hoping that we might get a plot revelation or two based on things in the series. But sadly, this collection kind of did none of those things. It really just honed in on more moments with the characters. And like we've discussed with Empire of Gold, I mean, that can be satisfying, but it's not my favorite thing in the series. It's not really what I was looking for here. And so I didn't have the best experience with it. Now, if you're somebody who is reading the series and are in it for the characters and you liked Empire of Gold, I would recommend you read this. But for me, sadly, this didn't work as well, and I gave it a 3-star rating. Next up, I picked up and read a cozy fantasy, right? Who is she? Like, I don't typically read those, but I wanted to try one out to see if my gut feelings about the subgenre were actually things that would hold true, or if I should maybe be giving more of them a chance. And so I decided to pick up The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. And this one was recommended to me as a cozy to potentially try because it has more plot than a lot of them typically do. And in this one, we follow our main character kind of discovering that she is a honey witch. And the beginning half of this book is really about her discovering what all of that entails. And then the second half of this book really became more of a sapphic romance. And there were also like some subplot things in here too, in both halves. And I definitely enjoyed those. Those elements kept my interest throughout this book. But I will say, there were aspects to this that I didn't love that really did like kind of hold up my point of view that like cozies are probably not for me. So there were things in here that reversed or lowered the stakes with the magic. The villain in the story was pretty one-dimensional, and so like because of that, there just really wasn't a ton of like tension or suspense driving the story. And usually that's one of my absolute favorite elements in a book that has me more hooked. So reading a book kind of without that as strong definitely didn't work as well for me. And then this one also contained scenes with dreams, which if you've seen the things I hate in books video, you'll know that I do not like dreams in my books. And yeah, they didn't work for me that well here either. I didn't really quite connect to the character emotion in this one either. And I think that that also plays into the tension, because if you don't have a really tense plot for a character to react and be emotional about, then typically like what they are reacting to is just less interesting for me as a reader. So yeah, I definitely think that this was a good read for me in that it definitely helped show me that cozies probably aren't for me, true to my gut instinct, but that I also did still find things to enjoy and they can keep my interest. So they're not totally a write-off, which is kind of something I thought was a possibility. So it's good to know that I have the potential to enjoy certain elements of one. But yeah, this was just middling for me, and I ended up giving it a 3-star rating. Next up, I decided I was finally going to catch up on the John Marrs books for that read-along that I had been behind on. So I picked up The Good Samaritan, and this was May's pick, and this one had the most interesting premise for me going in. So this follows a character who works at a suicide hotline, but their motivations are not all that altruistic, and man, was that true. This had so much tension and such a competent villain that just got under my skin and irked me. Like, it was so great to be able to read a nuanced villain that you got to really experience, especially after reading Empire of Gold, River and Silver, and Honey Witch, where the villain was like either pretty one-dimensional, not very nuanced, or not a huge part of the story. Like, this was like going back to, oh yes, I love this kind of stuff. But there were other elements to this that had me invested as well. So one of the things I have to mention is that the voice acting on the audiobook and kind of some of the sound effects were excellent. So yeah, definitely recommend the audio for this if you have a desire to pick it up. But it was also interesting to see John Marrs write from fewer POVs and to structure his story differently. So in this one, like the first third, you just get one POV, the second third, you get another, and then the last third, you're flipping between them. Typically in his books, he gives you probably 4 or 5 POVs and he just like rotates through them. So it was definitely interesting and different to read this one and experience his writing in a different way. I definitely still thought that he crafted this story very cleverly, and I totally understand the decision to write this the way that he did. I also found myself really enjoying the twists and turns that this one had. And yeah, overall, this was a great time. Definitely one of my favorite John Marrs. I think The Passenger still beats this one out, but I gave this a 4.5-star rating and had a fantastic time with it. Next up, I decided to pick up The Vacation, which was the remaining March one that I hadn't got around to yet. And this one follows a cast of characters at a hostel in LA, and they all sort of have their different unique circumstances and reasons and plots for being at this hostel, and that's something you get to unpack over the course of the book. But I also just kind of felt like this one was a lot of small stories that didn't really have strong ties to be together. I really felt like the scope of this was bigger than it needed to be, because I didn't feel like we got enough nuance with the characters that we did get because we were taking on so much. I think that also really affected the pacing of this one and kind of slowed down the first chunk, because you're kind of varying your time through so many of them that it takes a lot longer to really get enough information to be invested in one of them. It took a while to feel situated in the story, and it really wasn't until the ending of this where it felt like it made sense to all be in the same book. So overall, my experience with this wasn't the best, but I still enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it a 3.5-star rating. Next up, I picked up June's John Marrs pick, The Minders, and sadly, this one did not go as well for me. I got to about the page 250 mark out of 400, and I contemplated DNFing, and I should have, honestly. I stuck with it because I didn't have that much left. It was about 150 pages. This reads very quickly. And because this is part of the One universe, I knew that it could end up mentioning things that ended up being relevant in a couple of his other books later. So I wanted to stick it out. But if you're in the same situation and kind of contemplating that, I feel like it's okay to DNF this one. Like, I don't think it's really going to have crazy ramifications for the other two in this universe moving forward. And one of the biggest reasons I say that is because this one, while it had a really interesting premise of people having to be storage units for all the government secrets and information, because hacking in this society has become very prevalent, and this hacking collective is holding different governments' information for ransom from them and exposing their secrets. So with that setup, I expected more to have like a bigger picture story in here than we actually got. Instead, this really focused on our time with all of the characters who were minders and sort of what they were experiencing by being a minder. But I think the things that I was most looking forward to in here were like a bigger picture of what was going on in the world, what some of the government conspiracies and secrets were, and not so much how the people carrying this information experience their day-to-day life. I think also the answers you do get in the end of this were not that satisfying for me. There was a lot of the ending that sort of felt like it was kind of a fever dream, or intangible in some way. Like, it didn't feel wholly logical or plausible, which is a little unusual for John Marrs because typically he tries to make his books very realistic. And so this one definitely has a different vibe to it in the ending than his other ones do. But yeah, I just really wasn't hooked by the character experiences in this one. And at one point in the book, I was kind of cheering for the villains or the hacking collective to kind of like take over so we could learn some government secrets and like at least have some tension and action. I was like, this is just not what I wanted. So yeah, unfortunately, we got a lot of character focus and we got an ending that just did not feel tangible or all that logical. And so this really didn't work very well for me. And I ended up giving it a 2.5-star rating, and it's definitely my least favorite John Marrs so far. I do have high hopes for the other ones coming up in the One universe though, because I'm much more intrigued by the premise of those ones. And typically something I'm finding with his books so far is that if I'm interested in the premise going in, I end up really liking his books. But if I'm kind of like lukewarm on the premise, or like not that interested from the blurb on the back, they seem to be less highly rated by me in the end. And that's kind of interesting for me because that's not always my typical experience with different authors, but it's kind of good to know that I do tend to have that experience with John Marrs at least. The last book we're going to talk about today is First Writer's Call by Kristen, the second book in the Green Rider series. So I didn't manage to catch up on this read along, but I did at least get to one of the books that I was behind on. And I definitely had a great time with my reread of this. So if you don't know, the Green Rider series mainly follows Kerrigan, and she's a young lady who is away at school but is having some issues at school, so ends up leaving. And then on her way home, she encounters a rider pierced by 2 black arrows. And on his deathbed, this rider begs her to take up his message and deliver it to the king because he is the Green Rider, a messenger of the king. And basically, she gets sucked into delivering this message, and the series unfolds from there. So First Writer's Call introduced you to a lot more of the political scope of the world. It also gave me a lot of little tidbits to have interesting theories on and try and piece together. And I just really love when a fantasy series does that for me, where it gives me enough breadcrumbs to kind of piece together my own theories on things. And I also just really enjoy the character dynamics and the pacing in these novels. So yeah, had a great time with my reread and definitely recommend the series. So that was it for all the books we had to talk about today. Let me know down below in the comments, what were your reading experiences with any of the books I read this past month? Did you have similar experiences, different experiences? And also let me know, what was your favorite book that you read in the month of June? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out if you want to, and have a great day. Bye!